Kalen's independently rotating eyes usually scanned the world in two different directions, a Zenthari's natural advantage. Not now. Both orbits snapped forward, locking onto the single, decaying human book with a rigid, painful focus. His ears rang. A single, high-pitched tone drilled through his skull, yet he couldn't look away from the text the Matrix had just finished deciphering. What I found in that dust-choked archive was never meant to be read by living eyes. Stay close, because some secrets are better left buried in the dark. That same high-pitched ringing. It had been a mere background hum 3 cycles ago, when Kalen first pried open the vault's secondary seal, desperate to find enough data to salvage his failing reputation as a freelance chronicler. The hollowed-out moon was a tomb of silence, a vast, airless expanse of titanium and dust, where the only sound was the rhythmic thrum of his own life support suit. In all my years of scavenging the periphery, I had never seen anything so extraordinary as the human archive, a sprawling cathedral of physical records, preserved not by digital locks, but by the fundamental architecture of the vacuum itself. It was beautiful. The ancient humans had utilized the Casimir effect, weaponizing the very emptiness of space to pull metal plates together with such force that the air between them vanished, creating an eternal, airless seal for their fragile paper legacy. It was a masterpiece of physics, and honestly, it made every Zenthari engineering feat look like a child's toy left in the sand. I was looking for, well, it doesn't matter now. He had found the translation matrix, a small, obsidian-like slab designated EO83, lying atop a pedestal as if it were a religious relic rather than a linguistic tool. He picked it up. His left eye swiveled to track a flickering light in the corner of the room, while his right eye remained fixed on the matrix, a common Zenthari multitasking reflex that usually kept his mind sharp and focused. But the matrix was different. It didn't just translate words, it seemed to translate the weight of the intent behind them. I remember thinking that if I could extract even a fraction of this data, my peers back at the observation pact would finally have to acknowledge my worth, and the sting of my previous rejections would be forgotten in the wake of such an unprecedented find. But the Matrix was struggling. It converted the human script into Zenthari easily enough, but when it tried to translate the human concepts into the broader galactic trade tongue, it defaulted to an unidentifiable, jagged language that made his skin pigment shift to a dull, bruised purple. It felt wrong. He approached the first open book. The vacuum seal had been broken by time, or perhaps by the weight of what was written inside. The matrix hummed. It began to feed the translation directly into his optic nerves. The book wasn't a collection of songs. It wasn't a treatise on peace. It was a catalogue. Predator index. Terran fauna. Kalen's independently rotating eyes began to twitch. I was about to scroll to the next page when the matrix surged with a sudden violent energy. The archive's lighting shifted from a soft amber to a sharp, clinical white. He noticed a small, oily stain on his glove. It was probably from the seal, a minor detail that shouldn't have mattered, yet his mind latched onto the smudge as if it were the only stable thing in an unraveling universe. The ringing in his ears intensified. The matrix flickered, and for a heartbeat, the unidentifiable language was replaced by a series of coordinates that spanned the entire Orion arm, coordinates that marked the locations of every species the humans had ever encountered. His left eye, previously scanning for exits, involuntarily snapped toward the right. The holographic archivist wasn't a warrior. She was a scholar, or perhaps just a phantom of one, sitting at a desk that existed only in shimmering light, and her expression was one of profound, wary amusement that made Kalen's skin pigment shift toward a terrified, translucent gray. She looked at where a visitor would stand, her translucent eyes holding a spark of something ancient and undeniably hungry. "You're curious about the index," she said, her voice a series of melodic clicks that the matrix smoothed into perfect Zenthari. "Most are. They think it's a record of our failures, of the things we lost when our world burned." She paused, and for a moment, the holographic projection flickered, revealing the skeletal machinery beneath the archive floor. It's not. It's a trophy room. Kalen found himself wondering if the humans had ever truly understood the terror they projected into the cosmos, or if they were simply too busy surviving to notice the silence they left in their wake. It was almost as if, but the thought was too heavy to carry. He shouldn't have been there. The archival records were consistent with, well, they were consistent with nothing he had ever seen. If the observation pact found out he'd triggered a Tier 1 sentience, his career wouldn't just be over, it would be erased from the planetary records. Our ancestors ate poison, drank acid, and set themselves on fire for entertainment. Reconsider your strategy. She wasn't threatening him. She was stating a historical fact, a baseline of existence so brutal that it made the Xanthari's most violent wars look like a polite disagreement over dinner. Kalen noticed a loose thread on his pressure suit. It dangled near his wrist, swaying with his ragged breathing, a tiny imperfection that seemed more real than the ghost of the woman before him. He focused on that thread, watching it move because the universe was suddenly much larger and much colder than he had ever imagined. And now, in the center of the silent vault, Kalen's eyes remained locked forward, fused by a terror that transcended his own biology. The high-pitched ringing reached a crescendo, a needle of pure sound that seemed to vibrate the very fluid in his ocular chambers. He realized then that the ringing wasn't a defense system at all. It was the frequency of the translation matrix. The unidentifiable language on the obsidian slab of EO-83 wasn't a language. It was a sequence of high-frequency pulses, a weapon code designed to override the neural architecture of anyone trying to siphon human data. The matrix didn't translate human into a predator tongue because the humans had absorbed those enemies. It translated human into those sounds because humanity was the predator. The code was a virus. It was a set of instructions for a hunt that had never truly ended, and Kalen, in his desperate greed for a story, had just invited the hunter into his mind. A rhythmic, heavy thud. It replaced the ringing. It was slow, steady, the sound of a heart that didn't know how to stop. Kalen stood in the airlock of his ship, the obsidian slab resting on the floor at his feet. He didn't touch it. He watched the dusty, hollowed moon recede into the velvet black of space, its surface a pale, scarred reminder of a species that had weaponized the very vacuum to keep its secrets. The translation matrix remained dark, yet in the reflection of the viewport, Kalen saw his own eyes. They were still locked forward,